What's going on, fellow collectors? It's Sue here. We're back in the studio, and I'm so excited to share this week's collectible with you guys. Okay, gamers, NieR Automata. Did you enjoy it? Because that game far surpassed my expectations, and today we're gonna go over all the details on this NieR Automata 2B figure from a company called Flare. I'll cover all of its aspects so you can decide if this is the 2B figure for your collection. Just a heads up, the quality of this figure totally caught me off guard, in a good way though. So let's dive right in. We're going to break down this video in a couple of categories, starting with who makes this figure. In the past, Square Enix manufactured most of their properties under their own first-party toy line, Play Arts, and have been very close-guarded when it came to licensing out their brands. But the gates are finally opening up. If you've heard of a company called Prime 1 Studios, they have a very ambitious diorama that is over the horizon, but at $3,400 US, it's out of the reach of a great majority of collectors out there. Enter Flare Toys, who manufactures today's featured collectible. Now, it's surprising that Flare was even able to get this license from Square, because after some research, I found that they primarily make figures of the Bishoujo type. Bishoujo, if you don't already know, is a Japanese term for provocative younger body types, which doesn't have the best family-friendly image or wide audience that Square is used to marketing their brands to. I was extremely skeptical of this figure when I ordered it, and maybe it was because I had low expectations, but this figure changed my opinions on what can be achieved with PVC figures. Now onto the technical details. 2B was sculpted and painted by Mitsumasa Yoshizawa, and the Virtuous Contract Sword was sculpted by Takayuki Higashi, and Pod 042 was sculpted by Fumihiro Matsumoto. As alluded to earlier, this figure is made of PVC and ABS plastics and sells in two different SKUs. The regular version with just the main body retails for around $150 US. The deluxe version at around an additional 50% cost, $220 US, which adds an optional lower torso swap out, an unmasked portrait, and Pod 042 complete with stand. Pricing and value is always subjective, as I always say, but the standard figure alone at $150, in my opinion, is pretty good, as the quality alone speaks volumes for the figure, and we'll see that here pretty shortly. The additional 50% price hike for the deluxe isn't necessary, but provides a decent amount of alternative display options, and I personally love the added variety. You can pre-order either version on Square Enix's site, and I'll link those down in the description below. With the base, 2B stands at a height of 11.25 inches, which is 28.58 centimeters, though the base is 6.25 inches or 15.88 centimeters in diameter. Her sword juts out quite a bit, so her total width is actually 9 inches or 22.86 centimeters, and her depth is 7 inches or 17.78 centimeters. Moving on to Pod 042, on the base, it stands at 13.75 inches or 34.93 centimeters in height. Its width and depth stays within its base at 4 inches or 10.16 centimeters in diameter. Its size and dimensions overall are a bit on the awkward side, as the figure itself is an oddball 1/7-ish scale, which can make it difficult to display with other figures you may have. For display continuity, it's probably better suited to stand on its own or to pair with the upcoming 9S figure in the same line. 2B's stature and pose overall is exceptional, evoking very powerful body language as her ribs are pronounced and jutting out, down to her meticulously placed leg positionings. The ever so subtle arches in her ankle create and add so much presence to her pose. It's truly beautiful. Her stance carries all the way up on her alternate outfit, with folds on her right obliques area, which swaps in and fits her pose just as seamlessly as the standard outfit. The base is a plain, basic black disc with metal attachment pegs. Not much to write home about, but just be aware that the stock promo photos showed a clear acrylic base, which is not what you get. I can definitely see people being able to customize a more detailed environmental base and propping her height up higher if this base doesn't do it for them. Now let's move on to the sculpting and overall details. Let's get the bad out of the way first. One of the most important aspects of a figure to me is the portrait or head sculpt, if you will. The biggest discrepancy on this figure is going to be just that, the head sculpt. Flair's history of toys rears up in this department, as 2B does have a younger, youthful portrait. Usually, if a portrait isn't faithful to the character, it's a deal breaker for me, but since the quality and detailing is so stellar and half of her face is covered on the standard portrait, I can give it a pass this time around. The unmasked portrait isn't bad at all, but I personally don't see 2B in it. Another low point on the figure are the feathers along her forearms, as they look ironically plasticky and shiny compared to the rest of this, well, basically plastic figure, right? But those are the lowest points of this figure. The rest is absolutely delightful. Which, let's start with the more noticeable stuff. There's stitching everywhere on her dress. Most are obvious, but it's impressive that they get them even down to the knot area on her dress skirt. There are folds of leather under her knee area, which is nice, but it's not unique to figures like these, right? If we go in closer though, we can see that her boots actually have a leather texture, which shows us just how versatile PVC can be with the details squeezed out here. The laces behind her boots under her knee area have a deep and detailed effect, eyelets and all. The fingers on a figure like this are extremely small and tiny, but even then they're able to squeeze out the glove seam lines in between every finger. Details like this do a great job at breathing life, character, and dimension into a collectible. This is stuff that few may even ever notice at all, but that is just how meticulous the details are in this figure. Moving on, there's skin spillage out of her leggings boots area, which is done well, and we've seen this before as well in other figures. But to take it a step further, the dark band around her leggings create this believable constriction point on her thighs as we transition down into the lighter gray areas of her leggings. Now, how impressive is that, right? Next, let's get into the paint and finished effects. We'll start with one of these smaller areas, which is the skin. I'll be straightforward, it's creepily realistic, which is strange because this figure doesn't have a realistic design or realistic art direction. The skin has a very soft, layered, and translucent look to it. It almost looks as if it's made of silicone or some other soft material, but it is indeed a solid PVC or ABS-like material. The textures of the skin even feels creepily soft and not at all plastic. You can flash and shine the hardest light directly onto its surface, and it produces no shine or reflection. As a matter of fact, you can shine light directly through it. The only issue I have with the skin is that it's slightly pinker and more lifelike, as opposed to the game where the characters have a very pale, lifeless skin tone. The accuracy of the skin tone is a pretty big deal to maintain faithfulness to the continuity of the story, which is missed on this figure. Her lips have a wet gloss on them, but I think that takes away from the style that NieR Automata's characters are supposed to reflect. Remember, the character designs in the game intentionally have a slightly inhuman quality about them. All the lighter areas on her outfit, including her hair, have a pearlescent sheen on them, though it's a little less pronounced on her hair, which is in contrast to the rest of her black dress, which has a very flat, matte finish. The inner lining of her skirt is one of these areas that have a high pearlescent sheen, but the level of detail into the printed design inside this area is absolutely exceptional, especially when you consider this area is barely visible at all. Other areas with finely printed designs are the pearlescent area along her gloves, as well as the optional torso. Even the heels on her boots have a contrasting pearlescent gray, which gives even more depth to the overall paint job on this figure. Now, let's not forget about our handy sidekick. Pod 042 is all plastic with a metal support stand. Both arms have 3 points of articulation and move both vertically and horizontally. This little machine is also superbly detailed. The intricacy of the design is fairly complex for Pod 042, and yet all of it is perfectly, and I mean absolutely perfectly, recreated and represented here. I would have thought it was impossible to squeeze out these kind of perfect geometric details and paint on a tiny figure before seeing this. If you keep in mind that Pod 042's body measures in at less than 4 inches in height, maybe these details seem more impressive then. Alright, so no figure is perfect, so let's go over the bad stuff and the areas I'm not so enthusiastic about. We already talked about the head sculpts, skin tones, feathers, and its oddball 1/7 scale. Another thing is that the sword is plastic and not metal, though that may be due to weight, as heavier loads can cause PVC to bend, warp, or even sag over time, as we don't want her to lean. But they didn't even do a special paint finish on the sword at all, which is kind of a downer considering the rest of the sword is so beautifully designed, and the rest of the figure as well is just so impressively painted. The paint isn't perfect though. Mine did arrive with a couple of defects in both the paint and sculpt, though your mileage may vary, so it's just the luck of the draw. Since this figure initially sold out fairly quickly, a replacement wasn't possible for me, so keep that in mind when collecting these types of figures. I actually might just repurchase this figure during the second production run in hopes of getting a better suited figure. On to things that I think could have improved this figure. Now, weapons in this game were so iconic and had so much character, it would have been nice if additional weapons could be mounted hovering behind her. Also, I wish she was at a minimum 1/6 scale. That would put her in line with more premium collectibles, but then again, maybe this oddball 1/7 scale is what makes this figure so impressive and unique, that this kind of detail can be achieved in such a smaller scale. But now that we've covered all the details, how about I shut up for a bit and let's just enjoy some collector eye candy. I've got tons of PVC figures of all types, and whatever process the factory Flair uses to mold the pieces on this figure is among the highest quality anyone can squeeze out of PVC figures that I've seen thus far. At $220 US, it's not a cheap figure, but based off of quality, to me, it hit that itch for a really good NieR Automata collectible. If you can't justify spending nearly $1,000 US on Prime 1's offering, or even the $3,400 US for their diorama, I highly recommend this alternative from Flair, even if it isn't perfectly accurate to the game. This is a piece I wanted to cover for a very long time, and I'm so glad to be able to share it with you guys because it's been so hard to get genuinely great NieR Automata collectibles that are officially licensed. Be very wary of the fakes of this figure on eBay, as they are many and atrocious. I'm glad it's back up for sale on Square Enix's store so that everyone has another chance to pick one up. But that's gonna be it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for stopping on by and listening to me geek out about this 2B figure. If you guys enjoyed it, help me grow this space with a like. For more content like this, sub, and if you have any questions or comments, you can go ahead and leave them down below. As always, don't worry what others think, collect the things that you love, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Again, thank you guys so much. Happy hunting and take care.